What's up, everyone? It's your girl Brain Shanae, and today finally I'm doing an October wrap-up and a November wrap-up. So let's go ahead and get started of what I read in October. So for October, as you may know or may not know, Blackoween was happening, and I was so excited with Blackoween this year. And then there was a nice little twist to it. We were able to get different locations with Toolish Parish, which, you know, y'all can look up everyone's announcement that they did for Blackoween, including myself, including the creator Bree from Lock Petition. And it was just a great time. It kept you motivated. It made you wanted to read more than what you usually do. And so for Blackoween for this year, it's where you were in different locations, and once you finished 5 to 6 prompts, you became the investigator Thoreau. And for me, I was able to do that with 3 locations. And so I'm here to share with you the books that I read for Blackoween. So I was able to be investigator Thoreau for Ruby's Crew Park. I was also investigator Thoreau for Laissez-Faire Streetcar, and also for Noir Apothecary. So those are the 3 locations I was able to accomplish and to become investigator Thoreau. So for the first book, this was for Ruby's Crew, and that was the Dark 30 Southern Tales of the Supernatural, which you can see the title and the book right here. It looks really creepy, and I loved each and every one of the stories that was within the book. When you read it, it talks about like African American history all the way through time of slavery into the civil rights era. So the 20th century. So it takes you on a journey. And I will say, like, I read that in one night, and I listened to the audio for it, and I really enjoyed it. Now, this book is by Patricia C. McKissack and Brian Pickney. So just to FYI, so that y'all know who it's by. And of course, with Blackoween, these are books by Black authors within the crime, thriller, horror genre as well. So just keep that in mind. And I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed each and every story, and I'm glad that this was also the group read for Ruby's Crew. I really enjoyed it, and yeah, so I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars for this read. And then I also read, this is also for Ruby's Crew, and I believe it is. I have a lot that I was reading for, but I believe this was for Ruby's Crew as well, because it's also a middle grade. So let me go back here, because I want to make sure I'm giving y'all accurate information. And I do have it. Yeah, so this one was for Ruby's Crew, because it's a middle grade. And this one is Alex Wise versus the End of the World. I give this a 4 out of 5 stars. This is pretty much following a boy named Alex Wise who has a lot of issues with his dad. And I like that it brought up that aspect of it, of how, you know, how his dad wasn't around him and how he felt, and how his mother was taking care of him. So I really like this book. I love Terry J. Benson Walker. I read Blood Debts by him. I plan on reading more by him. Blood Justice, I think that's the next book after Blood Debts. And then I'm just looking forward to his work in general. I was really surprised that he had a middle grade coming out, and I'm happy that he did. This is just a very fantastic time. And it says, like here on the blurb on the back, it says, "Never has the apocalypse been so fun." So literally you have Alex Wise and his friends coming together to stop the apocalypse and also to save his sister. And so I don't want to get into much of it. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. So I need y'all to read it. I'm not going to give anything else away. Y'all just going to have to read it and see for yourselves how much like of a fun time you'll have with reading this. So this is another book that I read for Blackoween, and this was also for Ruby's Crew. And then let's go ahead with the next one. So this was a manga. I needed some type of palate cleanser because I was reading a lot of horror and mystery and thriller. So I needed to mix it up a little bit. So I read The Dragon King's Imperial Wrath, Falling in Love with the Bookish Princess of the Rat Clan. This is volume 2. I read volume 1 the previous month, and this recently came out, so I had a good time with this. I've been reading a lot of manga this year, and I'm really happy that I have been doing that. It has opened my horizons to new things, and I'm really happy that I'm now reading manga. So yeah, this is following the Rat Princess after she's been chosen by the Dragon King. and something happens to her at the end. So y'all have to, if y'all want to read this little manga, it's really cute. It's a fast read. I like the graphics within it. It's really good. But of course I gave this a 5 to 5 stars for this one, The Dragons King's Imperial Wrath. So yeah, so I did also read this in November. And then the next book that I read, which was separate from Blackaween, I read Salt and Water by Candice Elo, which here is the cover. And I love Candice Elo. Like the writing they do is phenomenal. I really enjoyed this book. We're featuring the main character, Cerulean Jean, who has this type of free spirit, who feels like school should not be something so constructed and so restricted into some things, you know, because there are a lot of children who get bored and they want to do something creative. And with Cerulean, she wanted to do things more, you know, that seemed more beneficial to her life and to her peers' life. And I think we could say this with some school systems where, you know, they're restricted to doing certain things. And, you know, sometimes there's schools where it's for the arts and stuff like that as well, which we do have here actually in Columbus. We don't have a lot of them, but we do have them. And it just was embracing how we wait for graduation to leave to an oppressive capitalist system. So it also was talking about that with school and how it prepares you to go to college, but then you're in debt. It's like that's what they expect you to do, is like after high school is college, and that's the norm. And that was for me when I was in high school. That's what they kept drilling down our throats, like college, after high school, college, and after college, a career. No, it's not like that. That's not how life works. That's not how this country works, because college isn't free here. We don't have free education. And literally when the main character in Salt the Water, she was just telling how oppressive it is. But of course she gets in a fight with a teacher. It does spiral out of control. But I enjoyed this book. I think it opens your eyes to different things. It opens your eyes to the school system. It talks about consequences of choices that are being made throughout this book. But like even with this little blurb that we have here, Salt the Water is a book about dreaming in a world that has other plans for your time, your youth, and your future. It asks, what does it look like when a bunch of queer Black kids are allowed to dream? And what does it look like for them to confront the present circumstances of the people they love while still pursuing a wildly different future of their own? So yeah, there also is queer rep in here, you know, LGBT. I love the representation in this book as well. So just keep that in mind. It's like realistic fiction, it's contemporary, it's young adult. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book. I believe I gave this a 5 to 5 stars for Salt the Water. If you haven't read any book by Candice Elo, I highly recommend that you do. Their work is phenomenal, and I just love this cover. I do plan on getting the physical copy eventually because I want it on my shelves. And I just love the aspect of it, of how there's always, how come everything has to be in order to live our lives, you know? So yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed this book by Candice Elo, Salt the Water. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend that you pick it up. So there is that book that I read outside of Blackaween as well. And then another book that I read outside of Blackaween, which I really enjoyed this book. It was hard-hitting. Sometimes it was very difficult to read. This book is written in verse, by the way. I was able to get a copy from the author, and she signed it for me. Well, it's not the finished copy. This is an ARC. And I enjoyed this book, even though it was really hard, but this is stuff that's actually happening in the real world, and I'm glad it's being brought up. And even she has a blurb by James Baldwin, which says, the victim who is able to articulate the situation of the victim has ceased to be a victim. He or she has become a threat. And so it says, for the girls affected by the actions of, it says SB, we won. So here is the book right here. It's called All the Fighting Parts. This is by Hannah V. Sawyer. I don't hear a lot of people talking about this book. I don't think people realize that this book is out. And I'm not even going to read the synopsis because it says something about this book. So it says, a searing and defiant novel in verse about reclaiming agency after a sexual assault within the church community. So it says 16-year-old Amina Conte has always believed in using her voice as her weapon, even when it gets her into trouble. After cursing at a classmate, her father forces her to volunteer at their church with Pastor Johnson. But Pastor Johnson isn't the holy man everyone thinks he is. The same voice Amina uses to fight falls quiet the night she is sexually assaulted by Pastor Johnson. After that, her life starts to unravel. Her father is frustrated that her grades are slipping, and her best friend and boyfriend don't understand why the once loud and proud girl is now quiet and distant. In a world that claims to support survivors, Amina wonders who will support her when her attacker is everyone's favorite community leader. When Pastor Johnson is arrested for a different crime, the community is shaken and divided. Some call him a monster and others defend him, but Amina is secretly relieved. She no longer has to speak because Pastor Johnson can't hurt her anymore, or so she believes. To regain her voice and sense of self, Amina must find the power to confront her abuser in the courtroom and her heart, and to learn to use all the fighting parts within her. Which this is happening. I know there's a lot of allegations as well regarding, for example, Diddy and TD Jakes and stuff like that. But it's realistic in the community when it comes to churches and pastors. There's some out there who are just completely fraud. And I like that it talks about, especially with the main character Amina, how she does end up using her voice once again and no longer stands quiet. Especially when it comes to realizing that other girls were hurt by him as well. So this book brings awareness. I really and highly recommend that you read this book. It is written in verse. It was a very fast read for me. I did get through it fairly quickly, but I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. You're probably going to be seeing this book again from me when I do my top 10 books of 2023, and this definitely is on the list. There's things that I've experienced in church, not necessarily sexual assault, but the hypocrisy and being very hypocritical of it all. I couldn't do it. And I think that's why for me, I'm on my own spiritual journey right now, for me anyways. So yeah, but if y'all haven't read this, I highly recommend it. It's really good. It can be really hard to read when you get to a certain point in this book, but I promise you, just read it and see for yourself, the very ending and the result of everything, especially with what happened to Amina, the main character in this book. But yeah, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. If you haven't picked this book up yet, I definitely think you should do so. So I also read this in October as well. The next one I read was also another a palate cleanser, which was also another manga, and that was Villains Are Destined to Die. This was volume number 4, which is right here. I didn't feel like getting my physical copy. And I really like it. It's very adventurous. There's a lot of action-packed experience within this book. It's a good time. So I'm not going to get into much of it. Y'all just have to find it out for yourself. But I love this manga. So yeah, I plan on reading the 5th volume really soon. It seems like these volumes keep coming out really quickly. So I gotta try to catch up, because once you don't catch up, there's a lot of stuff. Like manga, especially when it's a huge series, you can lose your way so quickly, and you're like, dang, I'm like 20 mangas behind, oh my gosh. But so yeah, I'm trying to stay ahead of them and trying to read them as they come out if possible. So yeah, this one is Villains Are Destined to Die volume 4, which I did really enjoy. So let's move on to the next book. Now this is part of Blackoween. I read this for laissez-faire, a black classic, and also a book with traveling, and of course that is The Living Blood by Tanana Ridu. I love the African Immortal. I love this book so much. I plan on reading the next book by, in this series by Tanana Ridu, with vampires and about the character, Jessica. A lot of people do not like Jessica at all. You have Fauna in here. It was just a good time in here. I don't want to get much into it because it can be, in my opinion, complex. So I can't really talk much about it. You're just going to have to read it and find out for yourself. But of course, I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really good. And I just love Tanana Ridu's work. I have to thank you, Bree from the Lock Beautician, and also a few others that recommended this particular series. So I'm just thank you so much. But yeah, I read this for Blackoween, and I read this for Laissez-Faire Streetcar. So we have this one that I read. The next one that I read, which is also the group read for Laissez-Faire that Bree and I from Bree Cherie Reads, we read together. We also did a live discussion about it, which I'll leave it up above so you can check it out. And I really love this author. I know a lot of people don't really like her work. They didn't like her first book and they didn't like her second book, but I enjoyed both of them. And so we have The Dark Place by Brittany S. Lewis. And I gave this, I think it was either a 4 out of 5 stars, I believe. And it's mostly still talking about grief. And like even on the back it says, her lips were stitched together and the smallest, tiniest flowers budded on the edges of where her smile ended. There was skin covering where her eyes should have been. No eyelashes or anything. All of it gone. And she would not stop coming for me. So within this book, we are featuring the main character who travels. And she doesn't know why or how it's happening until she ends up being, staying with her grandmother. She doesn't know why she's not living with her mother and father. She doesn't know what happened to her brother after when someone broke into their house, why that happened. And so with this particular book, it talks a lot about family secrets, in my opinion. It does. It talks about family secrets and how it can be very detrimental to your family. Like they were keeping this away from her. And then to find out like her grandmother suffered because her grandmother explained to her that she had another uncle or whatever that disappeared when it was a baby. And I wish her grandmother had shared this with her because the main character felt like she was alone. Like she didn't have anybody at all. And so Hailey she felt alone in the world, especially with the gift that she has in this book. But I gave this a 4 to 5 stars. I'm not going to get much into it. I want y'all to watch that live discussion that Bree and I had regarding this book. Brittany S. Lewis, when it comes to her writing, it breaks down into how the main character deals with grief and how she manages it all when it seems like they're up against the wall. So I like this book. If you haven't read it, please do so. I want to hear your thoughts about it. So I also read this for Laissez-Faire, which was the group read. And then the next book, which this is also goes into Ruby's Crew, and that is Eden's Everdark by Karen Strong. Gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. People kept talking to me about this book like over and over and over again. I'm like, okay, I gotta pick this book up. I gotta see what the hype is about this. But it was such a good time. Like a lot of people love this book. And it's like, it explores grief and connecting with your heritage, which I do love. I like the family aspect of it all as well. And of course there's like secrets within it as well. Some things are being revealed. But I just had a great time here, like reading this finally. I know a lot of my friends have read it and they loved it 100%. And it's just a beautiful cover. It's very beautiful. And there's a lot of things. It's interesting of like the nature of the world that's within this book as well. It's how can I say this? It was written well and really well, and it was just a well done type of thing. And like when I was reading this, I compared it to Coraline. That's how it reminded me, especially with the world within this book. It gave me those type of vibes, which I loved. So yeah, I love Eden's Everdark, and I'm going to be reading more books by Karen Strong because I have to. I got to. But this was just a fun read. So I did love this. Now the next book I read, and this was for Ruby's Crew, because it has root magic in it, and that is Bitter Root. This is volume 1, Family Business by Walker, Brown, Green, Renzi, and Cowles. And this, I'm excited to read the next volume. I just love the graphics of this so much. It's so beautiful. Like, I love this. And even on the back it says, once the Sangarees were known as the greatest monster hunting family of all time, their specialty, curing the souls of those infected by hate. Now, those days are fading. A terrible tragedy has claimed most of the family, and the remaining cousins find themselves divided by their methods. But with a new breed of monster loose on the streets of Harlem, the Sangaree family will have to come together to stop it or watch the human race fall to untold evil. So yes, I I think, yeah, Ashley from the Bookish Realm had got me onto this. Like, this is set like New York, like Harlem, New York. This is in 1924. So yeah, it's also very historical as well. So loved it, had a great time. Definitely want to read the next volume, which is probably going to be what I end up reading for next year for Blackaway, the volume 2 of Bitterroot. So I also read this. The next book that I read outside of Blackaway, which I love so much, so much, and that was The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson. Bree from Breachery Reads and I both did a year-long read-along by Brandon Sanderson, and these are the books that came out with his secret projects, the 4 of them, and I love this. It connected with Cosmere. All the books that we've read this year regarding Brandon Sanderson has Hoyd in it, different aspects of it, different aspects of things of what happened in Stormlight within this particular book as well, and I had a great time with this. Of course, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I just had a ball. So, like, I know some people don't know much about Brandon Sanderson, and I didn't know much about him until last year, and I'm glad that I read his books. The world is amazing, and it's just a good time. It's high fantasy with some sci-fi within it, so love this. So, of course, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. And then the next book that I read, now I didn't really use this for Blackaway in particular. It could have went with some of the prompts for some of the places, locations, but I just went ahead and read it. And that is Thieves Gambit by Kavion Lewis. And this was like a thriller type of deal where you have the main character, Rosalind, who just wants to live her life, wants to have a normal life. She doesn't want to constantly be on the move of, stealing valuable objects for a family, which there are families known to, have these great abilities to steal certain things. So that's one of her family. She's part of that, one of those families. And she just wants to be a normal teenager, but then again, her mother gets stolen and taken away. And so Rosalind has no choice but to become, participate in the Thieves Gambit, which is a contest. And if you win, you'll be able to, they'll ask you for what you want. You'll be able to get that. And plus you have like a contract where you work for them for a year, I believe. So it was a lot was going on within this book. I'm surprised no one has talked about it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, but this was just a fun read. It was fast paced. It just kept you wanting to know more, especially about Rosalind and this little love affair supposedly. But then there's also some betrayal in it here in this book, which I'm not going to get into because I was just like, girl, you should never trusted him, but it is what it is. So yeah, I read Thieves Gambit and I enjoyed this. So if you haven't read it, pick it up. The next book that I read, this was for, I'm trying to see. This was also for laissez-faire for a Black author outside the U.S. And that is The Changing Man by Tomi Yamakinde. Now, this was a creepy book. I'm not going to lie to y'all. I did not know what to expect from this book. I don't know if a lot of people have read it. But it was just, it would took you on like a wild ride, especially when it comes to like, this was particularly located in London, like in the UK, and it's pretty much it's like a private high school, and a lot of the kids end up missing and stuff like that. It's really weird, and it's like, and I feel like for me, like this will be a reread that I read next year, to be quite honest with you, because so much is going on with this book, and you're like, wait, what just happened? So yeah, so for me, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars because there was some it wasn't as complex, but it just seemed like there was some things that was a little bit confusing, but I still enjoyed it. But I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, and 3 out of 5 stars is still a good rating in my opinion. But yeah, it was interesting. I have to say that. Like, even on the blurb, it says, a teenage girl is pulled into investigating the truth behind her new boarding school's decades-old legend in this debut young adult speculative thriller. So, yeah, it's speculative thriller. And then it says, face front, watch your back, be brave. And if it was left to her, Efe Adebola wouldn't be starting at Nethercroft School. Because despite being in the Urban Achievers Scholarship Program, her parents can't barely afford the tuition. No matter who is trying to be friends with her, like her classmate Bijal, or how much the prestigious boarding school tries to pull her in, Ife is determined not to get caught up in any of it. caught up in any of it, excuse me. But when another student, Malika, begins acting strange, Ife can't help but wonder if there's more going on at Nithcroft than she realizes. Could there be any truth to the school's decades-old legend of the changing man? Is there any connection to the missing older brother of her classmate, Ben? As more questions arise, Ife has no choice but to team up with Ben and Bijal to investigate. But can the trio act quickly enough to uncover who is behind everything before one or all of them is the changing man's next victim? Then it says, this gripping atmospheric thriller is perfect for fans of Jordan Peele's movies and Farida Abike-Minde's Ace of Spades. So when it compared to the Ace of Spades, I'm like, oh yes, I loved Ace of Spades, but this is definitely a different read. But yeah, I still liked it. I plan on rereading it next year during Black Halloween because I'm like, I must have missed something. Maybe something wasn't clicking when I was reading it. But yeah, so this is another book that I read. And then the next books, let's see. I'm trying to see because there were some that weren't. Yeah. So the next one I read was for, I've accomplished investigator for Laissez-Faire and Ruby's Crew. The next one was for Noir Apothecary, which was a cozy read. And I went ahead and read Murder by Page One by Olivia Matthews. It was okay. I personally am not a huge fan of cozy mysteries. Not at all. But I still enjoyed it. In my opinion, I feel like some cozy mysteries are very predictable. I don't like that. I don't like predictable reads that much. I like to be surprised and not be like, oh crap, it wasn't her. No, it wasn't him. Oh my gosh, it wasn't either one of them. For cozy mysteries, for me, I feel like they're very easy to predict. But it was a fun read, I will say. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. But yeah, so just with that book alone, I was able to accomplish Noir Apothecary for all those prompts and became investigator thorough for those. But yeah, so those were all the books that I read in October, and I just had a great time. It was fun. I love Black Halloween. I love the different locations you get to go to. Hopefully I'll be the Grand Searcher next year. I have 3 more locations I got to get to. So once I get to those 3 locations, then I'll be the Grand Searcher, hopefully. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to my November reads, which I'm excited for. I didn't really read, or excuse me, before I even get to November, there was another book that I also read, which was also for Laissez-Faire, and that was for Jackal by Aaron E. Adams, which is right here. Sorry, I completely forgot about this one. I read this book. I gave this a, let me see. I don't remember. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this book, especially if you're a Black woman, man. Yeah, I enjoyed this book's. This particular book, it speaks volumes to many things, especially missing and murdered Black and Indigenous girls that are harmed every single day in America, and people, and especially this government that we have in the U.S., especially the police force, all that stuff, they don't care. They don't care. And it brings up that issue, and it's still an issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue, especially where I live in Columbus. I think it was in Cleveland, or maybe it was in Columbus. I'm not sure. There were children missing, and they found out who was behind it all. And some of them were police officers, some of them were doctors, or judges. So it's bad. It's bad. And I feel like a lot of our missing children and young women and young men are missing based off of a lot of these powerful people that have money. I'm just going to keep it 100 with y'all. That's how I feel. You have the Epstein list that's going to be coming out, and we're going to see who else was involved with that, because I feel like justice needs to be served, especially what happened with those girls. Justice needs to be served when it comes to these missing Indigenous kids, women, young men. Something needs to happen. A lot of especially with the missing Black boys and girls, women and men that are missing on a regular basis, and no one seems to give a shit. That's a problem that I have with this country. But I like how this book Jackal brings awareness to that. So if you haven't read Jackal, I highly recommend it. Like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So I liked it. And I wanted to read it last year, but didn't get a chance to, because I was skeptical about it. But at the end of the day, I love it. I appreciate every single word. I love the awareness that it gives. So if you haven't read Jackal, I highly recommend that you do so. So there's that. And then now we're finally into the books that I read in November. November wasn't really a great reading month for me. Personally, I had a lot going on with family. And I was also sick as well. On top of that, with a cold, whatever. I don't even know what I had. It was bad. It was like I had it for like at least for 2 weeks, and I had this terrible cough for 2 weeks. So it was just not the best month for me. But I read a little bit. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I read at least 5 books in November, which wasn't bad. I mean, I still read, it's just not as much as I would wanted to read in November, you know. But one of the books I read in November was The Serpents, The Wings of Night. The Serpents and the Wings of Night, and this is by Carissa Broadbent. This is the first book in the series, or I think it may be a duology. And I really enjoyed this, especially when it brought up vampires and stuff, and how a girl was adopted by one of the top vampires in this world or whatever. And I don't know, but it gave me like the Underworld type of vibes. That movie, you have the Underworld. I think it was called the Underworld. I think it is. And there was lichens and vampires and stuff in it. And like, especially with the aspect of this powerful vampire adopting this human girl, I was like, what? And so she is living amongst vampires, and she's learned how to fight them, how to kill them. And so she starts to fall for one in particular. And then something happens in this book where it's like, what the heck, man? You put your guard down, and this what he does to you. So now I'm looking forward to reading the second book. I know with these books that this was republished. So for this particular book, it came out in December. So I guess it was republished. So the second book, I can't get it right now unless I got it maybe on Amazon. But I'm going to wait because like I said, it was republished. So they're reprinting all the books. So the next book comes out later in 2024. But I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. This was really good. Like humans or vampires. Oh, the rules of survival are the same. Never trust, never yield, and always, always guard your heart. Such a good book. Such a good book. So if you haven't read Carissa Broadbent, The Serpents and the Wings of Night, I suggest you do so. You're missing out on a good time. The next book that I read, which was my book club pick, and we did a live discussion, which I'll leave it up above, and that is Warrior Girl Unearthed by Angeline Boulley. Such a good book. It talks about ancestors and how, in particular, how some museums, they have these artifacts that don't belong to them. And how with this particular book, you have Perry that's trying to get all her ancestors' remains back onto their land. And a lot of stuff is happening, especially when it comes to that issue that I was talking about, a lot of missing Indigenous girls, which it brings up that part. It brings this up as well, especially with black kids that are missing as well. I'm going to keep saying it. It's still a huge issue. And so people are going to still write about it. I like how authors are still doing this, because it's like, it's still a problem and something has to happen. Somebody has to realize that these kids are missing and they're human beings. They should be important. They should, regardless if you don't know them personally, they should be important. They should have priority where they should try to find these missing kids and these missing young women and young men as well. But yeah, I love this book, and I'm not going to say more about it. I want you to watch the live discussion. So once again, I'll leave it up above so you can check it out. The next book that I read, I did a book review about this book, plus I did a live discussion about this one, and that is Worthy by Jada Pinkett Smith. You can see that I tabbed it up. A lot of people do not like Jada. I feel like with this particular book, it gives you a different perspective. Like, I read Will's book first, when his came out, and then now I read Jada's. There's some things that I questioned. I think some of it is still maybe questionable, but I still enjoyed reading it just to hear her out, letting her have her voice, like everyone else does. They want to have their own voice and their own say of what happened and of whatever, tell them from their side, because there's always two sides to a story, so you might as well hear out all the sides, right? So yeah, it's a memoir, so I really don't rate books when it comes to nonfiction like this particularly, but I enjoyed it. So I will link up above the live discussion, and I'll link up above my book review for Worthy by Jada Pinkett Smith. The next book that I read, which was really interesting, and that was The Heran Wars by Thea Guazon. Hopefully I'm saying the author's name right. If not, I apologize. I enjoyed this. There was some times where I was a little bit bored. I'm not going to lie to you. I was a little bit bored with it, but it got interesting. So with this particular book, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, which still isn't bad. I want to see what happens in the second book, because a big reveal had popped up in the very ending of the book, where you have these two main characters. They get together. They come to an agreement of marriage because maybe they'll bring their two worlds together and they don't have to have a war or fight them or whatever. And then something happens at the end, and I'm like, dang, that's just crazy. Y'all are just terrible terrible people. But yeah, I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. The book is beautiful, and I think that's what motivated me to read it right then and there. But yeah, if you read The Heran Wars, let me know down below in the comments what you thought of it. What were your thoughts about what happened within this book, or in the pacing? I think the pacing is what got me. It was a little bit too slow, but I will definitely pick up the second book just because I want to see what happens next. So I also read this in November. And last but not least, I read the second book in this series, and that is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. I enjoyed it. I know a lot of people don't like Rebecca Yarros. When I read this book, I know there's a lot of controversy regarding Rebecca Yarros that I didn't really know much about. I had no idea about the interviews that she did or nothing until later on. But yeah, so I did end up reading this. I did enjoy it. I want to see what happens next, because there was a huge cliffhanger at the very end of this book. And I felt like it was just long for no reason for this one. Like, Fourth Wing, I enjoyed a lot. And then the second one, I'm like, all right, this is a little chunky. It's getting chunkier. I'm like, don't be like Sarah Janet, where y'all don't edit books. Like, come on now. But yeah, I still enjoyed it. I like the adventure that it gave me. I love the action. I like how, regarding the main character, Violet, as well as, Xaden, and his ex and stuff like that. I'm like, girl, you better get on her. Like, you better do something about her. But other than that, like, I enjoyed it. So I know, like I said, I know a lot of people didn't really enjoy it, and that is completely fine. I'm just mostly here for the action. So I believe I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars, but yeah, I plan on continuing reading the series just to see what happens next. But that is it. Those are all the books that I read in October and November. I'm glad that y'all were able first off, I'm glad that I was able to do this. I felt like I've been lacking when it comes to wrap-ups. I feel like wrap-ups can be so much work, to be quite honest with you. So I don't know if I want to do long video, like a long form term regarding videos. I might do shorts maybe regarding my wrap-ups next year. Maybe that's just an idea. Let me know what you think about it, because wrap-ups can be long videos, and as you can see, this one's pretty long, especially when I combined both October and November reading months. But I have to say thank you to all of you for watching this long video. I appreciate y'all being patient with me. I appreciate y'all watching me. I just appreciate the support that y'all give me. But thank you once again for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that bell to be notified when I upload more videos in the future. But thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you're staying healthy and staying safe. Bye, everyone.